6th to order. This is our normal finance meeting, so in addition to all of our budget work, we have a few other agenda items tonight as well. The first order of business is the minutes from our previous meeting on 10/12 of '21, copies of which are in the packets. Any corrections or revisions necessary for the minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve them. Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second by Herbst. Discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for the Metro Ride Fuel Tank Project for $21,200.25. And you'll recall in our last meeting when we were discussing Metro Ride's financial situation, it was revealed that they actually are under a mandate that they do some fuel tank work ASAP. And they actually have the money for that if we do this line item transfer, this modification, to get it taken care of in this budget year rather than holding it off to next year. Does anyone have questions on that fuel tank project? Sarah, go ahead.
I mean, it says budget neutral, but it looks like it comes from their surplus.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, that's true.
It's not budget neutral, but it comes from their surplus, so it's not like we're shuffling any other funds around,
Right.
right?
It is levy neutral.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and here's Greg.
And Greg is here if you have questions for him. If not, is there a motion to approve the fuel tank? Motion from Watson, second from Herbst. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action regarding the 2022 budget. And this is a continuation of our last couple of workshops where we've been grinding our way through the 2022 budget. And we spent the last few days ranking supplemental requests. Everyone got those in. And so we have a sheet that Emily gave us right before the meeting for how things stack up on the supplements. So I'll turn it over to Mary Ann, and she can kind of walk us through the results.
Yeah, and I just thought I would just quick do a little budget recap of, what the results of our decisions that were made at the last meeting.
Yes.
Hold on one second.
Since they all have costs too.
Yeah. Okay. So, since the last meeting.
Much
We
better.
did get our assessed value in, our final assessed value from the state of Wisconsin. So if you recall, the workflow there is our local assessment department develops the assessments values for the residential and commercial and personal property, and then the state develops the values for manufacturing, the real estate and the personal property. And then we submit our information to the state adds their manufacturing and then releases the total. So I had been using an estimate of a 1.5% increase in assessed value, and so it came in at 2.34%. So a little stronger than I'd estimated, so that always is good because that generally, this is the true tax base that we can allocate our taxes across, and so this will automatically reduce the tax rate impact of our budget. Property taxes, again, if you recall, we've been talking about our levy has two components: the increment, which is the $1.172 million this year, which was a big shocker for us, and a lot of that is related to new growth, but a lot of it is also related to corrections from the prior year because of the assessment ratio, and because we were using estimates due to the reval, and then that equalization process has a correction component. So that's why our increment has gone up, and we really don't have any latitude. We have to levy for that. Then we have our general levy, which is our operating budget. And we were, trying to hold the line as much as we can this year because of that increase in the tax increment. But I also explained that the equalized value for the city went down, and so our share of the school and county and technical college will go down. So that will help offset some of our increase. But you can see right now, as we stand with the items that were added back in, our levy is at a 7.23% increase. One of the things that we're always looking at is levy limits. So levy limit laws say we have to restrict our increase to net new construction, which was 2.798%. That gave us an additional $608 that we were allowed to levy in our operating budget. So it ignores the increment component and is only looking at our levy, our operating levy. So our increase is $1,040,000. So how does that work then? There's a component, an exemption in the levy limit law that says you can levy up to your debt service, and that is exempt from the process for debt authorized after July 1 of 2005. So our levy for debt service is $4,123,000. So when we go over our levy limit increase, it is consuming that capacity in that debt exemption. So, you know, you can see that we've been utilizing the debt exemption since 2015, and it would go up by the difference between the 608 and the 1,040,000, or about $400,000.
Okay.
What this means to the taxpayer, so our I should have taken out the estimated, our assessed tax rate based on the budget that we have today is a rate of $10.17. That is versus $9.71 last year, or a 46-cent increase, or 4.79%. Just another look at the department's budget. So this is after we added back in the contractual obligations and those inflation requests, anything that was added back in at the last meeting. Also, we discussed at the last meeting taking the Metro levy, which has been, you know, was scheduled to be the $890,000, and taking $500,000 of that and applying it to the capital budget. And Metro Ride will fund the difference through their CARES funding, with the understanding that once CARES funding is exhausted, either in 2023 or 2024, that their Metro levy would still be available to them and
Correct.
would be restored, because we've been using it for one-time expenses. So it's not like we're using it to fund salaries or things like that.
Sure.
One thing that we identified after the presentation, so we had explained that last year there was a large surplus in their 2020, so they had $780,000, and the 2021 surplus for them was predicted to be $627,000, so their total surplus was the $1.4 million. And then we had gone through the laundry list of projects that Metro Ride was going to allocate towards that surplus, the capital projects. And the one thing that was in error was the local share of the bus purchase was listed at just under $180,000, and it really should have been $742,000. The 180 number was the extra costs that the local share was going to pick up for enhancements to the bus or inflation. Is that right, Greg? Do I have that explanation correct?
There was a shortfall. I think
Yeah.
the shortfall about that was the total amount.
Yep. So really then, the commitment of this surplus of 1.4 million is really 963,000, not 400,000. But that still provides a capital reserve after that math of $445,000.
Well, and that does catch them up on at least a half a dozen projects that they've been asking for in CIP for 5+ years. Some of those, the door control and the video things and all of that, so that really helps them. Greg, come on up if you have comments for the committee.
I was just also going to point out that we've got our second tranche of money from stimulus, and that's like a little over 1.4 million that we also intend to apply to capital and other uses. So,
Perfect.
so the reserve is great, but, you know, we've got another pot that we intend to use for capital.
So it's-
Excellent.
So the math error here isn't going to create any hardship.
That was my error.
Oh, that's okay. It happens.
So then the capital plan, again, we talked about the 9.6 million is our capital plan, the various funding sources that included the transit levy reallocation, 164,000 of projects, a couple of IT projects, and the park drinking fountains were targeted to come out of ARPA, as well as 850,000 of the ARPA revenue loss allocation. So our debt to meet all of these projects is $4.8 million. And that includes the $1,150,000 for the facility,
The planning for the fleet facility?
Yes.
Okay.
So the impact of that is our debt, outstanding debt at the end of 2020 was 81,790,000 based on our plan. Obviously, we know now our December 31st outstanding debt for 2021 will be 76,524,000, and based on this budget and our existing amortization schedules, our outstanding debt at the end of 2022 would be 74,543,000. So still a downward trend.
And yet still getting done the work that we need to do, so that's a big plus.
And our legal debt margin, we would be at 44%. Again, that's based on an estimated equalized value for the end of 2022, but we'll be at 46.88 at the end of this year. And of course, as we've pointed out, we would have done better, but our equalized value went down, so that was part of the formula. We have been on this path trying to manage our debt levy each year, and that relies on us hitting a target of debt issuance somewhere between 2.5 to 3 million. The 2022 issue of 4.8 really is about 1.8 million in excess of that target. That will have a debt service levy impact of about 200 to 210,000. We could, step into that because we do have some fund balance, so we would be able to step into that debt levy impact, do something like 75,000 in 2023 and 75 in 2024, or 150 in 2023 and 50 in 2024, something like that. But our debt levy will ultimately have to go up because of the additional debt.
So in the excess 1.8, a lot of that is partially wrapped up in the ERP, correct?
ERP
Because it's
and
so
the-
expensive.
Right, and the facility, yep.
Okay.
So, and as we discussed, the facility is, a big unknown. We've gotten some tentative costs of about $24.5 million for, the entire facility. If we moved the facility off-site, if we build a large vehicle garage storage wash facility, do the motor pool garage, all of those things, the budget is about $24.5 million.
So this is the cost to essentially, like we talked about before, when we were all kind of arguing about 1300 Cleveland Avenue, to pick that place up off of Myron Street and move it completely somewhere else. And that's where we had talked about the fact that there would be some sticker shock associated with that, because, if a person was going to build a companion facility down the street, your cost is probably half of this. But if that's no longer an option, and there's no option to expand Myron Street, assuming that that site doesn't float to the top as the most viable site, then we're looking at numbers like this versus something that's a fraction of the original expectation was that half of the operation would stay at Myron Street, and, we would build the fleet facility separate. But if that doesn't happen, then we're looking at big-time costs with this.
Yeah, so with the project of this magnitude, to retire the debt over 20 years, we're looking at about a debt payment of about $1.6 million a year, which would have to be passed on to the taxpayer, or a 10-year retirement, $2.8 million. So, I think it's going to be, as I mentioned at the last meeting, important that we prioritize. I have a tickle.
It's okay.
I forgot to take my acid reflux medicine.
There's cough drops.
Sorry.
In that little pouch.
It was 4:30. So anyhow, and I know we've talked about phasing, but I really think like the phasing is not going to have to be like something one year and something else another year. It's going to be our highest priority one year, and then 8 years later, looking at a storage garage. Because we've lived without a storage garage, for many years, and maybe we're going to have to live without one for a number of years more. I think what we're going to need to do in conjunction with this is we have tax increment districts that are expiring that will provide capacity for us. So we're going to really need to do some good financial planning, do some predictions of when those districts will expire, what levy will be available, how we can fit these programs in. But I do think we're going to be in a situation where we have to phase this and be really thoughtful about what our priorities are. Because if you look at this, if we issued $24 million worth of debt, our debt is going to be at over $100 million. So that would be a huge bump.
Well, all of the progress we'd made in the last 6 years would be erased,
Yeah.
essentially. So, and that's why I think we need to lay side by side numbers like this with numbers from the plan we started with in the first place that addresses the fleet needs and then uses the remainder of the site at Myron for office and storage and the sign shop and salt and whatever, so that you're not going to pick the whole place up and relocate. You don't need to pick the whole place up and relocate. Half of it functions fine right now where it is. And so rather than, spend it up for $24 million, whether that takes 1 year or 8, that has a serious taxpayer implication where if we can get similar estimates for the plan that DPW started with, build what they need, new obviously, but not rebuild the entire place. And I think if we put those two side by side, I think we're going to find that it will reveal what we have to do, because the numbers will be starkly different. That's how I see this coming, just based on these numbers alone. And the original forecasts that we started with were nowhere near like this.
And do you, and I am asking this as a question, do you design the entire thing and then, put some of it on a shelf knowing that it's going to be in phased, or do you just design the things that you can afford today? I think those are all questions that need to be evaluated, and, I don't know that there's an absolute right or wrong. And of course, we had hoped that the infrastructure bill that was being debated by the federal government was going to be something that we were going to be able to use some of this for. So that, always is a possibility.
It is. Sarah, go ahead.
I guess my question, I'm not sure what the numbers were for the original plan. Do you guys know what that was? Or was there any hardcore numbers?
We'll bring up Eric. He had worked on that originally. Public Works Director will be with us in just a second. Here he is.
So when we initially looked at just the shop, we were looking at somewhere around $6 to $7 million. When we looked at a shop with storage, it was $12 to $14 million, and the truck wash. And so that was kind of the price tag that we were looking at, trying to utilize what we have and then, construct new what we need. Absolutely, sooner than later. And that would have to be at a different site, which is why 1300 Cleveland came in. Yep.
So both the 6 and the 12 would be at different sites?
No, like the 6 million, like the shop and the storage would probably be at a different location. We would utilize and try to keep everything that we have currently at the site, and then make some improvements in some office space and admin space. But the majority of the work would actually be a new shop and storage space and wash station for the trucks at a different location. Yeah, we did try to fit it in Myron, and we're still trying to work that out, but what it's gonna do is gonna require us to purchase private property down there, and we're just not quite sure if there's gonna be enough, that we could purchase to make that work yet.
Maybe this was a question that you guys talked about. Is the study already funded for trying to find a good location? I didn't follow that. Wasn't that SISM?
Yep.
I really didn't follow that.
Yeah, so that additional 15,000 that the council approved, that you approved, is walking us through. So we looked at, I think it was like 8 or 9 different sites, and then we initially kind of ranked those on which ones might be feasible. But then, the price tag is sitting at where it's at if we were gonna pick everything up and move it. So we're working with Barrientos right now, trying to focus in. I'm in communications with the county on their site. But I think even if we were to move next to them, if there was property available, I still think our price tag would be very high, to relocate everything, so.
The idea that we would be able to acquire, assuming people even wanted to help us out, assuming we would acquire property adjacent to Myron Street, that had a lower price tag if the land acquisition costs were reasonable, correct?
That's correct, yeah, it
So,
did.
and there was, we had some limited discussion about that in SISM, and, the narrative was already starting about forcing people out of their homes. I mean, obviously, that's not our goal. And so if there are property owners, and one of them, I think, is even a commercial property, but if there's property owners that are willing sellers and we're willing buyers, that's totally different than, steamrolling a neighborhood and telling that neighborhood, you're out of your house because we need this facility. But the narrative that has started to play out in that area already is that,
Yeah.
that we're a terrible neighbor and we're looking to roll these people out, and that's not what's happening. But I think as the study vets those sites, we need to recognize that the council took 1,300 Cleveland right off the table based on, a loud but smaller reaction. So now we're in a pickle where we have to figure out from the remaining 8 or 9, what will work. So
Right.
that's going to be a debate that we'll start it in SISM and have to finish it at council, but
Right.
I think this price tag should convince us to, I guess, either think about our priorities for the new facility or think about our priorities for the site selection.
Yeah, I think we started looking at maybe some smaller sites, like maybe the size of 1,300 Cleveland combined with what we have already, right? So maybe we can do the same thing with a different site, but we're trying to find out how far apart those sites are, continuity of operations, things like that. So that's kind of the next step that we're going through with our consultant, and so hopefully we'll have a couple feasible options for
Sure.
SISM and the council to hash out.
That's good, especially if the facility is at one area and the salt dome's at another. If they have to go across town to fill up and refill,
Yeah.
that's a problem, so.
Right.
Okay, good to know. Does that answer your question, Sarah? Did we get to, okay.
Okay, yep.
So that kind of brings us to where we are today, which is looking at the rest of the supplemental requests. The total of those requests is $535,064. That would add another 21 cents onto the tax rate. When you look at the increase already, I guess I would recommend that we give a very critical eye to these supplemental requests. Many of them are ongoing expenses, and we have a number of, I guess, kind of unknowns in the 2022 budget, because we're, doing some initiatives with salaries for employees as far as adjusting the salary scale, and, we can work on the estimates of those, but makes me a little nervous. So I guess
Well, if we hammer
think
our way
going-
through the scoring, where we rank them all, you can kind of see where things stacked up. I mean, we had kind of a detailed discussion about what each of these things are. And, you know, the things that were at critical, you know, are maybe the things we have to look at, but some of the things that ended up in the middle or towards the bottom are things that first added staff.
Right.
So added staff is always an ongoing expense, and it increases your cost to continue on an annual basis. And, you know, the other thing that ranked at the bottom of the list was the sesquicentennial celebration. And so, you know, I think if we were going to try to find a spot where we can get the needs met, but then, you know, nix some of this stuff, because we already have such an increase in the mill rate. At what point do you think, you know, where do we reach that cutoff point? I mean, if we were going to pretend we're in CIP where we draw a red line where you're out of money,
Well,
where does that fall? Is that like item 4 maybe?
The one thing too I wanted to bring up, so I had a conversation with Tony, the HR director, about this too, that CDL training, you know, I was giving that more consideration. So, you know, our existing employees who have CDLs don't require the training, so it's new employees. And, you know, the tech has CDL training for about $2,000. When you look, and so the training is necessitated by turnover. So you've got a vacancy that is necessitating perhaps someone having to get that CDL training. I'm thinking that we could fund it out of the savings from the vacancy. I looked at, you know, position such as equipment operator, on the lower pay scale of an equipment operator, just the salary, a 1-month vacancy is $2,000. So, you know, you're able to recover that CDL training with 1 month of vacancy, and it's very hard to, you know, fill a position in less than a month. If you include fringe benefits in a single plan, you're up to $3,000 of savings in 1 month. If it's got a family plan, it's more like $5,000. So you could, you know, I think that, you know, the 50,000 was, I think the estimate was developed by taking the number of vacancies we had this year and doubling it. But we really can't predict that. And I have typically said we don't budget for vacancies. So we don't, you know, there are communities and larger government entities that go, we know we're going to have a 3% vacancy rate or whatever. And they only budget for 90-some% of their payroll costs. We've never done that. We always budget 100%. And we actually, when we have vacant positions, we keep those positions budgeted at the incumbent's rate, so we already have like a little buffer in there. We don't bring it down to the bottom of the pay scale because we, you know, you don't know what that individual is going to negotiate, and we always generally put in a family plan for that vacant position too, so that we're covered. So, you know, I think that one of the reasons we've never budgeted for vacancies is because we say that, you know, those vacancies then do help defray the costs of retirement if it is a retirement benefit. Not all vacancies are generated by retirements because, you know, we've heard stories that people leave before they reach retirement. And so it would be my recommendation, and if you wanted to, you still, you know, if there was concern that they wanted a special line item for these funds, you could transfer it out of the salary line item into like a CDL
Like
licensing.
a training fund or something?
Right.
Okay.
So if people felt that they needed to have it isolated in the budget, that certainly would allow us to track the time, but I'm not sure that there's really a justification for rebudgeting the funds.
So if we wanted to, let's say, get that work done and plan, I mean, let's say that this year is a trial, because we haven't had this fund before. So if we try it in 2022, the vacancy route, and it turns out to be not optimal, we certainly could make an adjustment then for '23, assuming that we have this program still intact. So if we would try this and we would try it funded out of vacancy, We would have no levy impact, but we could still get the work done. Sarah?
And, I mean, we could just try this as a trial with like first come, first serve or application or where it's most needed, and then have it, funded that way and then not have it part of our tax rate, right? And then I had a sort of follow-up question too. We talked about the closed caption server and
Oh, yeah.
the one-time cost. If we could get that one-time cost paid for in another way, how would that affect the overall cost to the tax the tax rate? Like if we took out the
Well, we had
55,000.
talked about funding some of it out of ARPA, right?
Yeah. So it would be, let's see, it'd be less than a cent. It'd be, how do you say
It's
that?
almost 2 cents right now, right?
Right, with the capital, yes.
With the, okay.
Yep.
So if we could get the 40, let's say, are you talking about maybe taking the 49,000 out of ARPA?
Yep.
Because we had talked about that, because that does
did.
cause people to be able to participate in public meetings without subjecting themselves to a room full of people.
Or, I mean, I know we're talking about the surplus from this year. I mean, I don't know what our conversation's gonna be like that, because I know it said, 140,000?
141,000. Oh, that's
Yeah.
coming up in item 4.
Yeah, I just didn't know like, where that was gonna go, and if that could.
We have a couple of ideas for that.
But I guess it would impact, I mean, the amount of the increase on the tax rate if that, fixed cost would be taken
Right.
out.
Right. So if we'd get the 49,000 from ARPA, which we've got 15 million to work with,
Right. So it would be .0014 or something.
so a fraction of a penny,
Yeah.
basically. That would be a lot better. I mean, and
Yeah.
that then also increases accessibility to our programming for people that need it. Okay, and then that brings us to item 4, which is the salary scale adjustment. We figured that was key to recruitment and retention. That came up at, the levy share of that came up at less than 1 cent. Now, the culture survey, item 5. Do we know, are any other units of government doing this type of work? I mean, is there anybody that we can partner with? Is county doing it? Is any other community? I mean, do we really need 100,000, I guess is,
The county does a culture survey, and that's actually where I got the 100,000 from. I called them and I asked them how much theirs cost. So,
Oh, because Christy sent me the rates and it's only like 40 grand.
well, that's funny. I got that from Molly. So.
Oh.
okay,
She itemized their payments on
so, okay. And,
to me, the concern that I have with the culture survey too is, there is the Cadillac, and then there's something in between that and something else. It would feel better if we had a better idea of what we were actually, obviously, a culture survey is important, but
what
it
if we
seems
would
like-
ask the what if we would hold on that for right now? And ask the HR committee to go out to RFP for a consultant to do such a thing? Is that an option? I mean,
Well, for 100,000, you kind of have to, I think.
well, but I think to get price quotes, because, depending on what the scope of the work is, the price could, depending on what you want to analyze, the price goes up and down. And so just recently, I think that the HR committee, or at least the HR department, was engaged in polling the workforce to get some feedback to first figure out where the pinch points were. And that we did in-house, basically. So, Sarah?
I guess my question, okay, so if that happens, the RFP for the Human Services Committee, or Human Resources Committee, that wouldn't be in our next budget then, right? We would have to hold on it. Or can we put I guess what's the difference between these two numbers? Because that's a huge difference, 105 to 40 grand.
Right. Well, the other idea is you could hold it, you could put a pin in the idea that you want to do it, not fund it this year, and then we could see where we're at with results for this year. And, you might have carryover, you might have savings in other areas for next year, right? I mean, the mayor's on WebEx. Go ahead, Mayor.
Sorry, I had to come up here for a call quickly, but I think you're moving in the direction I was going to suggest, is that maybe talk to HR, I had the $40,000 number in my head too, and I don't know why, if it was something I'd heard from the county administrator. I do think culture survey is super important, but it's only as good as you continuously do it. So doing it every 2 years or whatever, like that's gonna be a commitment from us. So we should definitely have a strategy when it comes to an HR strategy. So I think pushing it back to them is a good idea, and maybe talking about it, and then RFPing and kind of understanding what we're in for, that's definitely a good idea. We could even see what the county thought of it and their,
Do we know roughly what the cost of the RFP would be? I mean, we could allocate some for the,
It's free. I mean, the RFP, because we do our own,
okay.
we're not gonna pay
Okay,
for
so
it.
we're not going to have a consultant to, okay, so we wouldn't have a cost to go to RFP. And by the time that goes out and the results of it come back and a selection gets made, you'd be a quarter of the way through next year anyway, in theory. So, Sarah?
So this isn't something like that has to be, I mean, it's not like we've already started it and have to fund it. This is a goal. We want to do it every 2 years.
Brand new
Oh, okay.
idea,
Yeah,
so,
okay.
yep. So we haven't been doing it historically, I mean, other than the survey type thing. But, okay, so let's just say we put a hold in that for now. Added positions, now we've got the added position for police and fire, for parks, for the arborist, for the economic development staff. Given the budget impact that we have right now, all of these functions have been doing without these people to date. So this isn't like positions that they had and lost. I mean, obviously, they all need more people, but we also, in the last 5 years, have added a lot of staff. I mean, finally got to the point where departments were adequately staffed to the point where we could not constantly be forcing them to do more with less and just, maxing out the people they had left. But we're maybe not in a position to bring on 3 new people this year. Sarah?
I guess okay, so if I'm sort of caught up, we're good with the hot mix, right? Our number one, that's what we want to try to add.
Yep.
We are taking out the CDL training funds and funding that through an alternative source of open vacancies, right?
Yep.
So that's off. We lowered the public access closed captioning server program to less than a penny because we're taking out that fixed cost, right?
Right, so just the $59.95.
We're gonna go with the salary adjustment because that's a very small amount and
Right.
it'll help with retention. We're taking out the culture survey.
Mm-hmm.
So with all those deductions, I mean, couldn't we fund those positions? Because those positions amount to like 2 cents. I mean, with the ash borer thing, but I mean, like, those 3 positions, I mean, it's about like 2.5 cents. And we already eliminated like 4 cents from our
We
amount.
could, the thing is that we want to, I guess, cut deeper into it, because if our cost, we're already looking at, were we at 47 cent of mill rate increase a couple
Yep.
pages ago?
And a 7%
Approving this adds
increase
another
in the-
21, so you'd be going up 67 cents for supplement on top of the request that we already had, which was 4.79%. So,
But I guess I'm concerned because when I look at like, especially the police and fire, I mean, the administrative assistant is going to be helping aid, for them to comply with the law, right? With public information requests and that kind of thing.
it just helps them comply faster.
Right.
Right now, the current staff is fulfilling the request, so they're not out of compliance.
They're not
just
out of
not super
compliance.
quick.
And then I guess my other thing about the administrative assistant for the econ development, I mean, utilizing our skilled staff to do administrative tasks seems a little wasteful.
Well,
when they
It
could be
doesn't
pursuing.
necessarily mean that it perhaps just causes us to be a little bit more creative and work together instead of being so silo-focused. I think sometimes looking for alternate solutions can be a good thing.
Well, and
rather
so,
than paying for
assuming,
something
because
new.
Marianne actually had a good idea about this a while back, and we were talking about this situation with economic and community development. Their office is steps away from the inspection office that already has 2 full-time clerical people. And so what we could maybe explore is the feasibility of one of those clerical people, because inspections processes have all gotten easier over the years since they've had help with new software and new processes. So if that's the case, if one of those clerical folks could be shared, over to the department next door, rather than bring on yet another person. You know, we haven't looked at that even to see if one of those people would have the capacity to be shared, or at least try the sharing and see if it works, prove it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, then we could look at something like this. But we haven't done that hard work on the front end to see what we could get out of our existing staff before we've just gone to the add more. At least in that position, not necessarily the police and fire thing, but the clerical person in economic development. We haven't tried to repurpose the people that are up there. Go ahead, Sarah.
I guess, so, I mean, I know that that's been vacant since I've been here. Like, what push do we need to do or directive we need to do to have them look at that? To see if there's ways we can optimize the people we have already in the clerical
I think we
position.
just have to ask. I think
Yeah.
that that's something that, you know, perhaps the mayor could discuss in her staff meeting monthly with the department heads. Figure out who's got what staff in the organizational pyramid. See if they could, you know, maybe for, let's just say for 6 months, try some kind of a sharing arrangement. See if it works. If it causes bottlenecks on both ends, we know it doesn't. But we haven't even tried that. So I mean, if that saves us some, you know, and I guess when I see how this scores, the one item that I see that I think we have to take a look at is this human resources recommendation that came up. And this was this bonus that we talked about at the last meeting. And it scored pretty low, but it is a longer-term employee incentive versus the payroll adjustment. And it seemed like most of us didn't like the optics of ARPA for that by any means. But do we have the option to look at that in 2021 as a surplus cost? You know, would we be willing to pay it out of surplus instead of ARPA if we could still get that incentive done? Sarah?
I guess that was my question to ask in the next one too, is because I wanted to know what what ideas we had for the 100 and whatever we have in surplus, 140. So that was one of the ideas.
That's one of the ideas. I think Alder Ryan in the last meeting mentioned that she wanted at least 100 of it for hot mix. But we're already going to put in 150,000 in hot mix this year, in addition to the normal street projects. Go ahead, Sarah.
And that's not, is that, the excess, was that going to help build up that one fund?
To get them
Two.
closer to 250, basically.
Oh, no, the other fund, what's it called? The backup fund, the thing that,
Contingency?
there you go.
We haven't infused that in a long time either. That's our
So-
emergency rainy day stuff.
So is that something else we had discussed about using the surplus for,
Right,
right?
that was one option from the last meeting that we had just talked about. We haven't done anything with that in a while. Luckily, we haven't had to use much out of it, but,
So I think the economic
oh,
development director.
yep,
would like to thank you.
come on up, Liz.
Thank you. I just wanted to let you know that I did talk with Bill Hebert about the sharing of an admin assistant when I first started, and it didn't sound like it was a possibility. I don't remember his reasoning. It was literally like, I think, my second week on the job that I had talked with him about that, but we did explore that option. I also just wanted to note that that is a position that did exist before, and we've been doing without because my predecessor in this role decided to do away with the administrative position. So it's not that it's a brand-new position. We've had this position as a longstanding role in our department and just have been without it for, I think, the last, 2.5 years or so, or 2 years. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the timeframe
He
exactly.
eliminated the position for a different position. So, you know, like your staffing didn't decrease, he just expanded it in a different way.
Isn't that how they got the
Realigned.
development manager?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that money went to the economic development manager.
Okay, well, I just wanted to clarify that at least the inspections kind of coordination, we have explored that.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay. But we also haven't tried it, so I guess sometimes it feels like it's easier to say, you know, when you're put in that spot, especially when you're in a non-budget cycle, it's easy to put yourself in a position to say, you know, we can't even try it. But I would love to see them try it on a short-term basis and see what the impact is in both departments, good, bad, or otherwise. You know, I don't know if that's an option, but I would hope that that's something that those departments could try. Just do a clinical experiment and see how it works. And with ash borer, we've been working, chipping away at the ash borer stuff for an awfully long time.
And they do have money in the budget for ash borer. This was an increase. So this was just the increase that they had. My recollection is there's about 100,000 in
Yep.
the budget already.
Right, and so this would give them some faster progress, but would, certainly wouldn't impede the work they're already doing. Pool hours, partially offset by user fees. That is a fan favorite with the public. I think that's, and less than 1 cent. Is it a third of a penny? Ish?
Parks Director does.
Oh, is Jamie on?
Yeah,
Okay, oh, does she have her hand up over there? Jamie, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to really quick just mention with the Emerald Ash Borer that we do have funds in the budget, but that was because we put in there as the ash borer was being delivered to Wausau. So now that it was found last November, so it's just been about a year in the city, that's when we really have to start progress on it. We've been trying to get ahead of it because, if we let it go, then we'll have a whole bunch of standing dead trees that become hazardous, and then we can't manage them with the staff that we have. So the increase is based on the fact that it is now here, and we do have to address it to try to stay ahead of it. So that's where the arborist comes in, as well as the increase to the funding. If we were to fund it fully to the full extent to try to make that 12 to 15 year cycle to get all the ash trees down, treated, and replaced within that time to try to not have any standing dead trees, the actual cost per year would be $251,000. So we have 107 in our budget. We're asking for that 63, which brings us to 170. That's still not quite the full amount that we estimate to fully keep on that schedule of 12 to 15 years. So we are pushing it out further with the hope that we can still stay ahead of it, but that's what that is for, and it's based on the fact that we now have it here.
Okay. Okay, so what are your thoughts, committee, then, on those added positions?
So would the arborist have to be included, or could we just fund the ash borer management increase?
If we fund the ash borer management, we can try to work it with the staff that we have, and some seasonal staff. That is definitely something we can try to do. The arborist just really assists our staff, because as I mentioned in my write-up, we only have 4 arborists currently, and if we're doing any big projects or have any big storm damage, we need 4 arborists who have that expertise. It's not something we can throw a seasonal on. So it's doable. It would be ideal to help us stay on task to have that additional person.
So-
but we can continue to use what we've been using.
With, I guess, okay, and with the ash borer stuff, if we have 100,000 in the budget already, recognizing that we've been funding ash borer for preemptive measures, obviously that is continuing, right? So, I mean, the fact that we have, whether we have ash borer here or not, we continue to try to either prevent or combat the ash borer. So if that 100,000 already exists in the budget, what would be happening with that 100,000 that can't happen without this 58?
Nothing. We'll continue to use that. It's just based on the fact that we have about 5,000 ash trees. So 100,000, is there to cover the removal, the treatment, and the replacement of a certain number of trees. So that's where that 12 to 15-year plan comes in. If we want to get there, we need to then up our game and remove more trees. We'll be treating the same amount of trees, so that'll be the same until we get to maybe around year 8, then we'll be treating less trees because we'll have less of a population. We just won't be treating anymore because we'll be removing them shortly.
But if we stick with the 100,000 that's already in the budget and leave that in there for you guys to work with, work would still be happening. It might not be as quick, right? So,
Correct.
okay, so we certainly wouldn't stop any of our ash borer efforts. In fact, we've had up to now, and including now, a robust effort towards that without adding another essentially 2 cents to the mill rate this year. I mean, there's so much uncertainty this year. I think if we could hold on this for at least 1 year and know where we come out the other side next year, we would be in a better position. Sarah?
I mean, I get that, but then I worry because before they weren't here and they were just doing some sort of like trying to preventative measures. Now they're here, and if they're sort of left unchecked, I worry that it could accelerate way faster.
Well, I think the work is different. They go from medicating the tree to cutting down the tree. Isn't that, the trees that have it, are, you take them out. The trees that don't have it, you medicate, right?
Yes, that's correct, but we also do so the kind of gamble with the emerald ash borer is that once it infects a tree, it can have been once it's been in the tree for about 4 years, all of a sudden the tree will just die. I mean, you'll see some signs of it dying, and we try to stay on those removals as those are dying, but there is a point where it could potentially get ahead of us, and then we have a lot of standing dead trees. And that's what we're trying to avoid by increasing the amount of trees that we remove and treat each year, is so that we don't end up behind the 8 ball and have a lot of standing dead trees, where then we're going to have to come back to city council for, for additional funding to get a contractor in to help us, because we won't be able to keep up with that. But that's hoping, that's the worst case scenario. So we're going to try to stay ahead of it as much as possible.
Right, so this is not a rapidly progressing situation anyway. I mean, we've been grappling with ash borer in our budgets this is the 5th year. So, I think that if work is continuing, I guess I have a hard time taxing people more in a year like this to just work faster towards something we're already working on. And, we already remove a certain number of either dead or damaged trees, street trees, park trees, whatever, all year. And I think if it's a situation where, you have standing dead ash tree versus, something else, maybe where it is and whatever hazard it presents would maybe require reprioritization of what's in line first for removal. But I have a hard time passing on a tax increase for that in 2022, because we're in such a tight spot this year, and we have so many, we rebuilt into the budget over a dozen critical items to fulfill contract obligations and accept inflation before we ever got to grinding this out. And so, I feel like we rank this stuff for a reason. And if we are going to build back in all 13 items, or if we're going to build back in 10 of the 13 items without a countermanding fund source, we're going to end up passing along a mill rate increase to people that's $1. And we can't. It's hard to make those decisions, I know, but, and where are we at with, let's look at the rest of the list here, because we're going to have to pick and choose here in a minute. Where do we leave off on extended pool hours? That's less than a cent, and it's offset partially by user fees. It's a fan favorite of the public, but the pools have been open like 5 summers, and they've not had it yet. It's easier to give something next year than to give it and take it away. So
I think that's a good point. If we want to pursue it later, we're already trying to sort of minimize costs, and I know it's not a huge expense, but it's not really a huge extension either, 2
right,
weeks.
we could
one
hold on
pool.
that. We certainly could
Yeah.
hold on that.
Time for that.
Okay. That brings us to the bonus situation. I think I talked a little bit about the optics of using ARPA funding for a bonus, even though our DPW crew did stay on the job and work right through the pandemic, keeping operations going in a efficient fashion. When a lot of occupations couldn't do that, they did it, and they remained on that front line. That said, they received no benefit from the salary range changes that we agreed to make on the bottom. And so now with full implementation of option 3, that does help a lot for some of the senior folks. But with this in the middle, and I think this is contemplating approximately $1,000 per worker. Is that correct, Tony? With the 87?
Yes.
Okay, and so without funding that through ARPA, is it possible to facilitate that as a 2021 expense? if we are able to earmark surplus for it.
Yes. And in fact, that would likely be better compliance with discretionary bonuses as are described by the Fair Labor Standards Act.
Okay, so we'd actually do it better if we funded it this year with a different source.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that takes 3 cents off the mill rate. So, you know, it's not that we don't want to give one, but I think the way we give it needs to be better than ARPA. Sarah?
And I think if we use some of that surplus, I mean, we would have like about 54,962 to go to contingency, if that's what we could choose to do. But,
Right.
Yeah, so, because it's only 87, right? Because 26.
It's 87 because some of it comes out of the utility.
Right.
Yes, so 87, so, okay. And so then, and the sesquicentennial celebration is an idea for a celebration to celebrate our 150 years, but there is not a firm structured plan yet for what these events are or what they would even cost. And so my thought is that maybe we should hold on that for now and see where we're at the end of this year and into next year. I mean, likely any celebration we do would probably not happen until the spring or summer event season. And so maybe then we can kind of figure some other funding approach out to account for that, the fun things, I guess. So if we want to recap where we left off here with the supplements, we were going to take number 1, which is the hot mix for 50,000. We want the CDL training fund, but we're going to pay for it out of vacancy, not levy. We're going to do the public access closed captioning, but we're going to fund 49,224 out of ARPA. The salary adjustment to suspend step 1 and 2, we are going to approve. The culture survey, we're going to hold on for now. If we hold on, let's say we hold on all 3 staff positions, which is 6, 7, and 8. We hold on ash borer and pool hours and the arborist, and we fund that bonus out of surplus this year. Where would that put us, Mary Ann, for the money
So
end?
you're about 3 cents, a little under 3 cents.
Okay, that's better than 21. We're making progress. So then, let me get us back to my other page now. We started out with, where was our original mill rate increase? Was it 46 cents plus 3, so 49.
Yep. Yep. Yes.
And so then what is let's assume the annual impact to a $150,000 home at a rate like that. Do we know roughly where that would put us for people's difference from last year?
Oh, at $100,000
Or-
home?
yeah,
Oh,
yep,
So
sorry.
it would be about a $50 increase.
Okay, so that's kind of where we'd be on a $100,000 home. You'd be at about a $50 annual increase, which then would fulfill all of our critical obligations, our contractual obligations. It would eat the cost of inflation, which we don't get a choice with, and it would get half this list done by the method that we thought.
And we're implementing the final option 3. We're giving a 2% cost of living increase. We're implementing
Hiring adjustments for pay.
accelerated
Yep.
step increase for new employees that are getting 2 increases per year. We're absorbing an 8.8% increase in health insurance, and the tax increment correction
Right.
last year.
And so then assuming that we have the leveling out finally of the reval adjustments next year, we would probably be, I think, in a better position to look at some of these things we had to hold on. But it's hard to say yes to everything this year. And we've had years where we could just do the whole list and it was fine, few and far between, but this just isn't one of those years. Comments from the committee? Go ahead, Mike.
So if we're looking at approximately $50, $75 increase for a $150,000 home, but our equalized value is going down by 2.4%, that our loss of equalized value will offset that increase slightly.
Yes,
So,
from the school, the county, and the
from the
tech.
school and the
Yep.
county and the tech.
Yes.
So,
Okay, so on that 150,000, rather than 75, we'd maybe be at some point under that, somewhere between 50 and 75.
Right.
yeah, but there'd be an assumption that their rate's probably going to increase a little bit too, but,
Right, but this puts us in a whole lot better spot than we started tonight with the 21 and the 74. So I guess if we approve the supplements the way we outlined them for the 3-cent increase, and then we continue with everything that we built back in at our last workshop, does that get us to a point where we're ready to finalize? I mean, would we be ready to, or do we need one more workshop, I guess is?
There's no additional information that we have to disclose, I guess. So it would just be whether you want to have another meeting. I mean, obviously, November 6th is the next finance meeting, and that is the, scheduled public hearing for the budget. So we could, or 9th, excuse me. We could definitely have a meeting, we could schedule a meeting, in between there if you wanted to.
What are your thoughts, committee? Are you satisfied with the way we have this and send it forward for public hearing on November 9th? Go ahead, Sarah.
I am perfectly happy with this, how it is, yeah.
I am too. I think we covered a lot of ground. Mike, you're good with it too? Okay. So then we won't need a fourth workshop or a fifth workshop. I can't remember, I've lost count of how many we've had. I think this is the third one. And so then we would have Mary Ann prepare this the way we've outlined it and bring it for public hearing on the 9th. And that happens at council, correct? Or does it happen?
Yes.
Yes. So we'll still have our normal finance meeting, but the public hearing on the budget happens at council, and she makes a little presentation on what we've achieved here based on these workshops. So if you guys are good with that, we'll send that forward. We should vote on that because we have discussion and possible action. So do we have a motion then to approve the 2022 draft budget with the changes we've approved? Motion by Herbst, is there a second? Second by Watson. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed. That item carries. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action regarding the 2020 budget surplus. We started to segue into this a little bit in our last item. So our budget surplus for 2020 is $141,962. And, we had some suggestions of things we could use that for. Mary Ann, did you want to go over any of that, or?
No, I really thought this was your discussion. I know, Deb had been focused on more street-related projects, and then there was the discussion of contingency. Obviously, if it flows to surplus, it's sitting in reserve, which contingency is like a reserve.
Is kind of,
but-
okay.
So it really is, the surplus isn't going anywhere, so it's not like you have to make a decision on it tonight.
So if we choose not to infuse the contingency fund per se, and we leave the fund sitting in unspent surplus, it really has the same effect?
It does, yeah.
Okay. And so let's say we take that bonus for the 87,000 that we had just decided we didn't want ARPA for. And if we took 87 of that,
It'd be 54,962.
so 54,962.
Left.
Deb sounded like she wanted some for hot mix. What if we would give 50 of it for hot mix and leave the 49,62? Go ahead, Sarah.
I guess how much of the additional 50 in hot mix could be used this year? Or is that not
It would
the
be in,
goal?
it would be.
It would be in next year?
In next spring, right? Any of the new hot mix? Eric's nodding. So it would all be projects starting with the spring.
Or could we just keep it holding? I mean, if it's just going to be going into projects next spring, we don't really have to allocate it now. And if something came up like the culture survey that we could fund through it, and we
So-
got an RFP that,
That's true. We could leave the 54,962 sit,
yeah,
knowing that if they get to, if they allocate or plan to allocate the 150,000 they have for hot mix, and there's other projects that need more, they could apply for a budget mod, if that would work. So how do you guys feel then about just taking the bonus out of the surplus and leaving the rest sit for now?
I would move to do that.
Okay, we have a motion from Watson,
I'll
second
second
by
that.
Martins. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries. So we will be able to get the bonus taken care of in 2021. And do we have to do a budget mod at the next council meeting for that too? or-
Yes.
Okay, so that'll go to the November 9th council meeting as well, right?
Yep.
Okay. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action regarding budget modification for the Public Works sign shop operations for $8,164. And you've got some information in your packets on that as well. Does anybody have questions on that item? I've got a page back in the packet here.
I guess I didn't see it in my packet. I thought I synced. Can you tell me what page it is in the packet?
It should be right before the blue one.
It's page 38. It's
Yeah, right
right
there,
before the,
Got it. So they would transfer money from surplus, from signs and lines paint to signs and lines, sign parts and supplies. So they're still getting sign stuff, they're just not painting. Do we have a motion to approve that? Motion by Herbst, second by Watson. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. And then, because we're running out of time and council is starting at 6:30, if you guys are okay with it, I think we could hold item number 6, which is the September report, and we'll have the September report at our next meeting, November 9th. Okay, so we'll hold that, and then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Herbst, second by Watson. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Nobody ever is. We'll stand adjourned, and then council will start in this chamber at 6:30. Thanks, everyone.